Good morning, everyone. Happy Sabbath. For some reason, I'm not able to access the chat, so hopefully this works on my phone here that I can see what you're saying. So I see someone already said Happy Sabbath. So Happy Sabbath to you. So hopefully this will be able to work. That I'll be able to see the chat on my phone that way. So good morning, happy Sabbath. I am glad you were able to join us. We hopefully will be getting a couple more people as we go. We usually do. So the check-in question for today, is how many times did you do something that was physically active this week? How many times did you do something physically active this week? So you can answer in the chat. Hopefully I'll be able to see it. It's hard for me to wait for the responses in the chat because I know there's a bit of a delay and everything like that. But when I'm just here by myself in the room, it seems very awkward to me to just sit here and stare at the computer when I'm live and I know that people are watching me. So it seems odd to just not say anything and just sit there. So I don't. Maybe it's not uncomfortable for you, but welcome to those of you who have just joined us. Our check-in question for this week is how many times did you do something physically active this week? And physically active meaning something beyond going from the couch to the chair. So that maybe we'll not count that as physical activity for this week. But what did you do this week that was physically active? How many times? Does eating count? No, we'll not count that. Housework it absolutely can count, especially if you have a little one running around and you're having to make sure that the little one is not destroying the house as you're cleaning. Painting, yeah, that can count. That can count. Changing diapers, yeah, running behind Hector. Absolutely. I have chased little Hector before too, and that definitely counts. So go ahead and continue. 4 push-ups. Good, Daniel. I was wondering what the regimen you were on. Daniel's my brother-in-law. He's looking good, so way to go. Your body responds well to 4 push-ups. So go ahead and continue answering how many times did you do something physically active this week? The reason I wanted to ask that question today is because many of us are kind of stuck at home, and it can be really easy to fall into a very static state where your life pretty much consists of getting out of bed, walking to the table, eating breakfast, and then going to the couch. And that type of lethargic lifestyle is going to make us a lot more sad. It's going to make us a lot more depressed. And so I want to make sure, hey, let's think about what we're doing. And so physical activity is going to be really helpful. It's going to stimulate all kinds of things in your body. And also it's going to stimulate your mind. So Peggy said painting, and that's an excellent thing. I hope that you are getting up and doing something. That's why I wanted to do that check-in question today. Pretty much all day long, every day. Remodeling bathrooms. Yes, that absolutely counts as a physical activity. Hope that you've also found rest then in your case. So our bonus question, our question that comes with a prize for this week. If you have watched the videos this week, then you have a leg up on on the answer to this question. So for a delicious beverage with me, compliments of me, what cute thing can Finnick do? What cute thing can Finnick do? Good. Got a couple answers. Eat oranges, wave goodbye. What cute thing can Finnick do? Yes, nice to see you're promoting physical fitness. Yes, from our physical fitness instructor. Thank you. Appreciate it. What cute thing can Finnick do? We had two good answers here. Eat oranges, wave goodbye. Do something with goodbye. Yeah. Okay, so those are good. Those are great answers. Those are both great answers. The correct answer was everything. Everything that Finnick does is cute. And so lick your face, absolutely. He does that too. And everything Finnick does is cute. So that was the correct answer. And if you thought that in your head, then you win. So you can continue to post questions in the chat. I will get to any questions you might have later. Also, I just realized Jody's one of the ones who is responding. Hi, Jody. Nice to see you today. Well, I guess it's nice to see me today. I can't see you. So before we jump right into to kind of the sermon proper, wanted to again remind you that our website, wahpetonchurch.com, you can go to the tithes and offerings tab there, and it will link you to the website Adventist Giving, where you can continue to give tithes and offerings if you so desire. Like we've said last week, you can also download an app onto your phone, the Adventist Giving app. Everything is secure there, and so you can continue giving in that way if you so desire. Secondly, what I wanted to talk about before we get started is you may have noticed that there were only 4 videos this week because yesterday there wasn't a video. That was completely my fault. I finished the video. I started uploading it. It usually takes about an hour or so to upload the video to YouTube. So I recorded it, edited it, and started uploading it, and then I went and did something else. And effectively, once it started uploading, then it's done. All you have to do is click a few buttons to publish it. And so I let it escape my mind because I started uploading it, I went and did other things, and then forgot that I hadn't published it. So I apologize. That was completely my fault. The video is done and it's up. What we will do to kind of avoid that in the future is, if there's no video by 6 p.m., so if you haven't heard from me by 6 p.m., then we'll just assume there's not going to be a video that day, and there'll be one the next morning. So if there's no video by 6 p.m., assume that there's not going to be one for that day, and we'll start the next morning. That should be able to help me keep myself ahead of the game, and also it will relieve me on days when I'm extraordinarily busy and can't get to it until 7 p.m. I'll just say, you know what, we'll just save this one for tomorrow. So if there's no video by 6 p.m., assume that there won't be one until the next day. And as far as announcements goes, I believe that was it. I'm sorry, when I lean forward, it gets really shiny. I have a bright light behind me. I don't have very good sunshine coming into the windows, and so it makes it really hard to get good light. So I have some studio lights that I put on here, but if I get too close, then it really shines up my head. So I'll try to stay further back on that. So today for the sermon proper, we are going to be looking at Leviticus 17. So if take out a Bible if you have one. I hope you do. If you have one on your phone, whatever, it will be really helpful for you to follow along if you have a Bible with you. So Leviticus 17 is where we are going to be. This is exciting because we are starting a new section in Leviticus. Chapters 1 through 16 are kind of the first half of the book, and then 17 through 27 are a new section that it kind of changes gears a little bit. It changes gears from here. Chapters 1 through 16 are like, here are the things that happen inside the tabernacle. These are the practices that are supposed to take place. And 17 through 27 deal with the communal life outside of the tabernacle. And we're going to talk a little bit about why that's important. So let's say a quick prayer as we dive into Leviticus 17. Father God, guide us in your word. Help us to understand the life that you have for us and the life that you want for us. In your name we pray. Amen. So there's 17 through 27 deal with a lot of communal laws in the book of Leviticus. And scholars have been looking at Leviticus since Leviticus has ever existed. And scholars can't really make sense of the thematic flow of 17 through 27. So there most scholars have a consensus that this is one section of the book, but we can't figure out why it is the way it is. It doesn't make the flow doesn't make a lot of sense. It seems a little bit lackluster. So scholars haven't really been able to figure out the structure of this section in Leviticus. But it is definitely segmented from the first section. So the the question that would have been pervasive on everyone's mind in during this time was, how do I get the divine on my side? We've talked about this a number of times. How do I get the divine on my side? How do I do the right thing so that the gods look favorably upon me? And chapters 1 through 16 in Leviticus offer a new way of looking at this question, offer a new way of conceiving of who God was. And it answers that question. How do I get the divine on my side? Leviticus 1 through 16 offers very clear instructions. This is how you get God on your side. So chapters 1 through 16 deal with, here's a new conception of who God is, and here is how you can get this God to look favorably upon you, because that would have been the ultimate question of every single man, woman, and child in this time period was, how do we gain divine favor? And it would have been an incredibly anxious question. This would have been an anxiety producing question of how do we make sure that the gods look favorably on us, because we depend on the gods for rain and for a good crop and for our livelihood. And so Leviticus says, hey, you don't have to worry, you don't have to be anxiety ridden. Here's exactly what you need to do. And chapters 1 through 16 say, this is a new kind of God, this is a new kind of world, and this is how we live well in it. So now we move away from a ritual practice in the tabernacle into these communal laws that exist for life outside of the tabernacle. And what we see is that not only are the laws the laws about the practice in the temple, not only are they these practices of quote unquote spirituality, not only are they inextricably wedded to ethics, but they actually are generative of the ethics. That the things that you do inside the tabernacle then influence the way that you go about and live your life. All right. So because of the rituals that we have in the tabernacle, because we do those things, we can now live life in a whole new way. Right? And this is what 17 through 27 is about. Because of chapters 1 through 16 and the rituals that we go through to gain righteousness, now we can live a whole new life because of who we are, because of who we have been changed into. And this communal shift, this shift to communal laws, rather, this is a necessary shift, because the whole purpose of the tabernacle system was to sanctify Israel. It was to sanctify the people of Israel, to set them apart in the world, to set them up as a holy people. And so if the whole system of changing you to become holy, to become righteous, if it doesn't change the way you live your life, then what is it all for? Is it actually sanctifying you if it's just a process that you go through because you're supposed to? If it doesn't change your life, then it didn't actually change you. And so the whole point of this was to sanctify Israel. And so of course, there's going to be an emphasis on communal laws of how we live outside after you've done your sacrifices at the temple. How you live is really important still. So we have one thing that is interesting in this section of Leviticus. So the book of Deuteronomy is in many ways the counterpart to the book of Leviticus. It is kind of a 1-2 punch. Deuteronomy was written later. Deuteronomy is essentially God reminding the people of Israel right before they go to the promised land. So they're about to enter the promised land. And the book of Deuteronomy is God reminding the people, you are my people, and this is how my people live. So Deuteronomy kind of takes Leviticus and expounds upon it a little bit based on the way that people had been responding to the book of Leviticus. So in Leviticus, there's in this section of Leviticus, there's not as much emphasis on poverty and on helping poor people. There's a little bit, there is a little bit, but in Deuteronomy, in this section of Deuteronomy, there's a heavy emphasis and very explicit instructions on how to deal with the poor people among you. And Leviticus doesn't have that. And the reason being is because Leviticus is about a brand new world. Like we've talked about over and over, we see markings of sevens. We see repeated sevens over and over throughout the book of Leviticus. And so because we see these repeated sevens, the 7 is a pointer toward creation and a brand new world that is being created and birthed right here in the midst of this one. And so Leviticus is very much the ideal. We talked about that a long time ago, back when we could still meet in our church building. We talked about this is the ideal. Like Leviticus represents the ideal world. It's a well-ordered world. And so if Leviticus represents the ideal, in an ideal world that God conceives of, there aren't poor people in Israel. There just wouldn't be poor people in Israel. And the reason there wouldn't be poor people in Israel is because the world was set up in an ideal way. So as we're going to get to in the next couple of weeks, we have laws like the Sabbath year, where every 7 years you didn't plant anything on the ground. You left it, what it says is you let the land lie fallow. You give the land a Sabbath rest. And so it was this idea that, hey, every 7 years, you don't produce anything. Just let it go. Just let it go. And then every 50 years, there was the year of Jubilee, which was not just a canceling of debts, right? And every 7 years, there was a canceling of debts that, hey, if you're indebted to someone, it gets canceled at 7 years. But every 50 years, which was the year of Jubilee, there was a total reset of the entire economy, that all the land was returned to its original owner. So if you were just a really savvy business person and you could accumulate tons of wealth and just put yourself at the pinnacle of all of Israelite society, then at 50 years, it all went away. It all went to the people you had taken it from over the past 50 years. So there's a total reset of the economy. And so with these types of laws, what the idea is that it instills in the people a Sabbath mindset, that life was more than simply production and consumption. And if life is more than production and consumption, and our main focus is not on our production and consumption, but our main focus is on the community and the health and vitality of our community, then of course there wouldn't be poor people. There wouldn't be any need to accumulate wealth in such an unfair way, because the focus was on the health and vitality of the whole community, not just yourself. Now, unfortunately, that was not that's the ideal, that picture that was painted in Leviticus, and unfortunately, that did not play out very well. And so we have in Deuteronomy, there's more emphasis on poor people, because we saw that the reality was simply that, hey, people aren't going to focus on this in this way unless we really delineate it out for them. And so we have more of a focus in Deuteronomy on the poor than we do it in this section of Leviticus, because this section of Leviticus represents the ideal of a well-ordered world. And then we didn't live up to that. Excuse me. So, undergirding Leviticus, the whole book of Leviticus, undergirding the book of Leviticus, especially this section, is this idea that there's something noble about being human. There's something noble about being human. There is a new world that's being created, And Leviticus calls the people to body forth this new world and this new ideal for the world. So let's jump into Leviticus 17. Leviticus chapter 17, it begins, "And Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to Aaron and his sons, and to all the people of Israel, and say to them, This is the thing that Yahweh has commanded." So right off the bat, there's something really interesting that we need to look at here. And it's this phrase, "and to all the people." So this is not God commanding Moses to speak to the priests, and then the priests can then tell the people. And this is not God commanding Moses to speak to the people. This is saying, hey, speak to the priests and to all the people. So there is then a divinely ordained authority given to the people to supervise the priests in their priestly duty. This has a lot of implications here, because what God was doing here was setting up, there isn't an authority structure that you need to usurp if the priest is doing something wrong. That every person has the authority to correct the priest when they are doing something wrong. The people are given total authority to supervise the activities of the priests. So when we have this idea that there's a leadership pyramid and the church leaders are at the top, and we can't just say, hey, it's wrong what you're doing, because that would usurp the authority of the structure. Leviticus, the very beginning of the Bible, suggests, no, actually, that's not the case at all. That there is some leadership qualities that have been given to the priests, but the people have a God-given authority to supervise and to make sure that things are going as planned. So you have the authority to correct church leaders when they are out of step. And you have a biblical given, a God-given authority to do that. There is no authority structure that you are usurping, because the only authority is Jesus. So right off the bat, the people are given an authority to supervise the priests. Now let's continue reading. This is what God has commanded. "If anyone of the house of Israel kills an ox or a lamb or a goat in the camp, or kills it outside the camp, and does not bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting to offer it as a gift to the Lord in front of the tabernacle, blood guilt shall be imputed to that man. He has shed blood, and that man shall be cut off from among his people." So this is a pretty serious thing. And when we first read it, it's not exactly obvious how serious this actually is. What this is this law demands that meat for consumption, right? That meat that you are eating with your family at your table, it demands that meat initiate as a sacrifice. So that meat has to start before you can eat it. It has to start as a sacrifice at the tabernacle. It's essentially saying, hey, you need to recognize the death that was required for your sustenance. There has been blood spilled, and you need to recognize that actually kind of matters. That's really important. And these words, and this is all juxtaposing, because in the original conception of the world and of humans, then there wasn't meat consumption. So if you look in Genesis, it says that all of the fruit and the vegetables and all of the plants are given to humans for food. And then when you get to Noah, then now there's an opening up and saying the animals are basically that you'll have dominion over the animals and you can have them for food. So the original conception was to not eat meat. And then it's kind of opened up. And so now this law is saying, hey, when you eat meat, you need to understand what's actually happening here. There's blood being spilled, and blood is the life force of the thing. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Recognize that, hey, there's been blood that was spilled in order for you to have life, to have sustenance. And God raises the stakes on this, because this word, when it says, hey, if you don't do this, if you don't bring it to the tabernacle and you just eat it, then the blood guilt is upon you. All right. And so blood guilt actually means murder. Like that's what it's equated with. And so this is very serious things, that if you don't follow these instructions, you are guilty of murder. Of another human being. That it's the same words that are being used here. The blood guilt is equated with murder of another human being. And when it says that person shall be cut off from the people, it means that that person will have no descendants in the house of Israel. So the whole purpose of living was to have a line that could succeed beyond you. And your line was cut off at you. So none of your children will be citizens of Israel. And there's even a lot of scholars that suggest that there seems to be an eternal aspect to this, that whatever conception people had of the afterlife, that being cut off extended into that. And so this was a permanent and eternal consequence of not following this instruction. Was, hey, you're cut off. You're no longer a part of God's people. That's how serious this command is. So in I played with Finnick earlier, and now I'm getting a little bit allergies because we cut his hair this week. Sorry. So in verses 5 through 7, it kind of outlines what the sacrifice is going to look like. And the word for sacrifice there is zeba. And it's the same sacrifice as in Leviticus 1, 2, and 3, the well-being offering. So this is not a sacrifice of expiation for sin. This is not a sin offering. This is a well-being offering. And the well-being offering was meant to initiate a meal that you then ate. So the point of the well-being offering was for the offerer to eat what was being offered. So we know that the point of this chapter is about meat that you eat, like meat that you have killed and then eat with your family at your table. And it was meant to come as a well-being offering. Now let's jump ahead a little bit to verse 13. It says, anyone also of the people of Israel or of the strangers who sojourn among them, who takes in hunting any beast or bird that may be eaten, shall pour out its blood and cover it with the earth. So what it says here is, when you're hunting the animals that are to be eaten. So what that suggests then is that when you're hunting, what you're hunting is food. You're hunting for food. And so in the Levitical mindset, sport hunting is not something that's envisioned in the ideal world of Leviticus. Hunting for sport is just not a part of this ideal world. It says, hey, when you hunt for food, this is how it happens. And hunting for sport would have been something that their neighbors would have been participating in. But Leviticus doesn't really leave a lot of room doesn't envision sport hunting. It merely says, hey, when you're hunting for food, it says, hey, hunt the animals that can be eaten, according to Leviticus 11 and 12. And so the ideal society of Leviticus doesn't have a lot of room for sport, for hunting just for the sport of it. That if there's no other reason other than that it's kind of fun to kill an animal, the book of Leviticus doesn't have a lot of room for that, because it's not mentioned at all. Now, at the end of verse 14 here, it says, therefore, I have said to the people of Israel, you shall not eat the blood of any creature, for the life of every creature is its blood. Whoever eats it shall be cut off. And again, cut off meaning that's like a permanent thing. You're no longer a part of the house of Israel anymore. That's a really big deal. And so an Israelite, if they are going to eat an animal, if they're going to eat the blood of an animal, they are risking everything for that. So this is heightening the awareness of, hey, this is what it means to eat meat. Okay, it's totally accessible to you, but let's be aware of what this actually means. And in verse 16 says, but if he does not wash or bathe them or bathe his flesh, he shall bear his iniquity. So that's what it's talking about is if you're like traveling out in the wilderness, right, and you find an animal, it's totally fine for you to eat the animal. I mean, you have to eat. So you find an animal, it's totally fine, eat the animal, but you're impure at that point because you don't know if the blood was drained correctly or anything like that. You don't know that. So eat the animal, but then you need to bathe. You need to wash your clothes, and you'll be unclean until the evening. You'll be ritually unclean until the evening, and that's just a process you have to go through because you don't know. You might have eaten the blood, and so you need to go through. If you did it on accident, go through this process, and you can be made clean. In verse 16, but if he does not wash them or bathe his flesh, he shall bear his iniquity. And this is the same thing as being cut off, as having the blood guilt, right? You are culpable if you don't take care of the things that you're supposed to do. If you don't make it right, this is a permanent state. You shall bear your iniquity. So the blood is really important. Blood is the life. We've talked about this before. Blood is a symbol for life. And Leviticus is actually explicit about it, that the life of an animal, the life of any creature, is the blood. And so what you're doing, if you're killing an animal, you are taking away the God-given life of that animal. And that is a serious thing. And that we should pause and consider how serious that actually is. Now, verses 10 and 12 are the crux of this whole thing. This is the point of the whole chapter. Verse 10, if anyone of the house of Israel or of the strangers who sojourn among them eats any blood, I will set my face against that person who eats blood and will cut him off from among his people. For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you on the altar to make atonement for your souls. For it is the blood that makes atonement by the life. Therefore I have said to the people of Israel, no person among you shall eat blood, neither shall any stranger who sojourns among you eat blood. The Jacob Milgram, I've mentioned him before, the preeminent scholar in the book of Leviticus, he makes the case that from verses 10 and 12, what God is saying here is there can be no viable human society that doesn't follow this command to not eat blood. There can be no viable human society that has a disregard for this command because they will destroy themselves. If you disregard the blood, the life of another creature, then what's the next step, right? If you disregard the life that you are taking for your simple consumption, then the next step is, hey, do we just take the life of someone that we don't really like, a human being now? And do we just exploit the earth until there's nothing left, right? So the reason why this is so explicit is saying, hey, the lifeblood that you are taking, you need to take that seriously. And if you disregard that, it only leads to your destruction. So this is about heightening the sensitivity to the life and death coming close together. All right, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, that there are these moments when the forces of life and the forces of death kind of come close together and they kind of dance together. And in those moments, we should have a heightened sensitivity to when those moments are happening. So this is the same thing. Have a heightened awareness, have a heightened sensitivity to when this is happening. This is not just killing an animal. It's not just a helpless animal. It's not just an animal that we're just killing because it's there, right? According to Leviticus, killing an animal is tantamount to murder. That's what it says, right? If you kill an animal and you don't bring it as a sacrifice, then you have blood guilt. You have murder guilt on you. So be discerning about when you kill an animal, about how often you kill an animal for your consumption. Do it the right way. Take it seriously. You are removing the lifeblood of another creature. Take that seriously. Respect it. What this commandment is ultimately saying is, hey, everything in the world does not exist for your mindless consumption. Everything in the world doesn't exist for your mindless consumption. You don't get to just look and say, oh, I like this. This is good. Just take it and I'm going to consume it because it's nice. This commandment, what the ultimate purpose was to set Israel apart. These people, these nomadic people in the wilderness, they care for the world in a way that honors the Creator. These people care for the world in a way that honors the Creator. These people have a wonder and an awe and a caution around the mysterious forces of life and death. So my question for you is, does your meat consumption honor the Creator that cares for the creatures who died for you to have that meat? Right? Leviticus offers a way. So does, and it's vastly different than the way that we consume meat, right? So does your meat consumption today, does it honor the Creator that cares for the creation? Does it pay proper respect for the blood that was spilled in order for you to have sustenance? There is absolutely a way to do it. And Leviticus probably doesn't give an exact way that we can replicate for today, but there is a way for us to consume meat and pay proper respect for the blood that was spilled in a way that can honor the Creator that cares for the creation that we are, the lifeblood that we are taking in order for us to have sustenance. And imagine a world in which our meat consumption was based on that principle. I can eat meat as long as it is honoring to the God who cares about the creature that I have killed. Imagine the difference of how our meat is produced, right? Imagine the difference in how our meat is, on how often we would eat meat, for example. That when we pay proper respect and when we honor the God who cares for the creation, then our mindset changes a little bit. And for those of you who don't eat meat, don't think that you're off the hook simply because you don't eat meat, because this chapter in Leviticus can speak to so much more than just the consumption of meat. Do your consumption habits in general, do the ways that you use the resources of the earth, do they honor the Creator who cares for the earth? Do your consumption habits honor the Creator? And it's easy to kind of say, well, you know, Revelation, the world's going to be destroyed. We're going to have a whole new world. And so, you know, I don't like, maybe pay attention to it a little bit. But yes, we're going to have a new world. But what's the point of having a new world if we have no idea how to live in it? Right? The book of Leviticus offers an ideal world, an ideal living space. This is what a well-ordered world looks like. And so if we get to a well-ordered world, but we only know how to live in a world that we trash, then aren't we just going to trash that new world? Right? What's the point of a new world if we have no idea how to live in it? We are training ourselves to live in the new world because we are called to live as if this is the new world that is coming. So, what are your consumption habits that do not honor the Creator? What are your consumption habits that do not honor the Creator? And what can we do about them? All right, so those are the questions that I would like for you to ponder throughout this week. What are your consumption habits that do not honor the Creator? And what can you do? What can we do about them? So this was a difficult sermon to kind of prepare because it doesn't have. It's hard for this to come out and be like, hey, look at the love of Jesus and it's so great and we can be immersed in it, and all of those things are true. And the Leviticus 17 doesn't have a lot of explicit ways to kind of make that connection, but it does speak to, if we have been changed by a creator who has imparted righteousness to us, this is then how we would go and live according to the righteousness we have been given. And so those questions then, what are your consumption habits that do not honor the creator? And what can we do about them? So that's the question that I want you to ponder as we continue in our study of Leviticus, because God deeply cares for the creation. And God set us up as stewards of the creation that he deeply cares about. And so as stewards, God essentially made us babysitters of his creation. And so are we conducting our lives in a way that when God comes back, that God would say, oh, thank you for caring for my creation? That's the ultimate goal of a well-lived life, is to, did you properly care for the creation that God placed into your care? Whether that be nature, animals, other humans, your own children, or your friends, or people who God has placed in your heart that says, hey, this person really needs to know my love, and I want you to show them my love. How well are we caring for the world that God has given us? So, are there any questions that you have as we conclude our study in Leviticus 17? Yeah, my husband was raised by Native Americans, and this was the mindset that was instilled in them. Totally gets it. Absolutely. The Native peoples had an understanding of kind of a circle of life, that, hey, we have to appreciate what's being given to us, what is being sacrificed in order for us to continue living, and we have to give back, and so that we can continue living well together. Any other questions that you have as we're going through the book of Leviticus? Oh, so, yeah, interesting. Yeah, sun, moon, and stars to separate the plants from the things with the blood. All right. Thank you so much for those of you who tuned in today. We miss you. We're hoping that soon we can gather together. But thank you for joining us today. It has been a pleasure to be able to serve you in this way throughout this time, and we're going to continue. We're going to continue on. It's not going to get easy. It's not going to be easy. It's probably going to get harder before it gets easier. But soon we will be together again. As always, I want to leave you with a blessing. May God bless you and keep you. May the face of Jesus shine upon you and be gracious to you. And may the fullness of the Spirit dwell within you and give you peace. Happy Sabbath, everyone.